Hi, Ann. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. It's good to see you.
Good to
Uh,
see you too.
a lot has transpired since the last time we spoke, but this is pretty amazing. I think we've done like three of those in 3 weeks now. Have we not?
Yes,
I think we
we
have. So
have.
that's pretty good. We might be able to squeeze in one more before the TCM Classic Film Festival
It's what I'm
begins.
hoping for.
But anyway, it's good. So I don't have like a huge amount of catch up to do with you since the last time we spoke, except that there was the final weekend of the Noir City Film Festival, and I just downloaded the questions, and glancing at question number one, I see it pertains to that recently concluded festival. So
Yes.
I won't talk about it. I'll save it for the first question.
Okay. All
Do
right.
you, do you want to
I'll
ask
go.
that question?
I will ask you that question. Dear Eddie,
Okay.
I was just at several showings of North City Hollywood. Have you thought about maybe restoring some more recent neo-noir films? I say this because The Prince for the Last Seduction and The Grifters were notably subpar. Was this just bad luck of the draw, or are there movies from only 30 years ago already in trouble?
Okay. That is, I see. That's Harvey in Tarzana, California. Beautiful Tarzana, California. Well, there are multiple facets to Harvey's question. First off, thank you for attending the festival. Number two, obviously, we did this time around, it was a bolt of inspiration to include um, four neo noir films, specifically because they all have female protagonists or antagonists, as the case may be, but the main character or characters are women, and that fit in with the overall idea of the festival this year, which of course are the dames, because in conjunction with the Dark City Dames book that's coming out, we wanted to focus on female centric films. So, but here's the thing. I really didn't think those two prints were, all things considered, I would not call them subpar. We were pretty lucky to get 35 millimeter prints of just about everything. And even John Dahl was very happy. He was the guest for the last seduction. He was very happy with the way the picture looked. And while the grifters had a couple of issues in the beginning, a couple of emulsion scratches and things uh, in the opening of the film, I thought it settled down and that the print was actually pretty good. I mean, one of the things that you look for in a newer film as it ages is that the color starts to turn a little bit. And I thought that especially in the grifters, I thought the color held up really, really well. It looked exactly the way Stephen Frears intended it to look. So um, that is a factor when you're considering this stuff. Like, how far is this from what was originally intended? And I thought that the grifters looked pretty darn good. And then we showed Destroyer and Bound this past weekend, and those looked absolutely spectacular. So I was pretty happy. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't issues with films that are 30 years old. So, yes, it can happen. The reason this wouldn't, in most cases, this wouldn't be something the Film Noir Foundation would get involved in is because we have no way of doing anything with those films. They're owned by the studios that produce them, and whereas most of the films we restore, those entities are out of business, and so there is no one left to protect the films. In theory, these films are supposed to be protected, right? Because they were either made by or released by companies that are still in existence, and it's their responsibility to take care of it. So if that changes, then I mean these are films that I would jump on instantly were they to have their rights lapse, or the company doesn't renew the copyright or something like that. But I have a hard time believing that's going to happen with, you know, The Last Seduction always had a kind of a tortured history, production history. So of the three of I mean I'm sorry, of the four, I would assume that that will be the film that will have those issues eventually, but it's not now. So, and of course, the other thing you have to remember is these are also films that have gotten digital releases, and those look pretty great. So it's not like the films are going to disappear. They're just not going to, they may not have 35 millimeter prints, but um, I'm kind of sure that was the case with the Grifters. That may have been the best 35 millimeter print that we were going to get from Miramax. And it, although it does have flaws, they won't make another print probably because they know that they can make a DCP of the film, or the Blu-ray looks pretty good. So these are the things that we weigh when thinking about what we're going to do, and I'm just very hopeful that none of those four films will need rescuing. That's my hope. Okay, then Reg asks, I enjoyed the film fest, and now he's not talking about the one in LA, I don't think.
No, he was talking about the
The one in Oakland.
2024.
In 2024.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
then
I
that
saw.
really complicates this question, because he
Yeah,
says, I enjoyed the film fest and sincerely appreciate the effort put in behind the scenes. I'm a big jazz fan, and it was great to see Ascenseur pour l'échafaud, Elevator to the Gallows, on the big screen. My question is, what was the name of the person who sang in French before you came on stage? Looking forward to next year's film festival, says Reg. Well, now I have to think about it if it was a year ago. It may, in fact, be the same person. I believe that was Lizzie Shapiro. Lizzie Shapiro, who also sang at the Noir City, but it could have been Lizzie, or it could have been Laura Ellis. Because I'm hate to admit this, but I'm thinking of other things when I'm in the wings backstage when our fabulous performers are singing. So we'll have to see if Nick Rossi or Laura or Lizzie are watching this show and can chime in as to who it actually was. Nick Rossi being the musical director of the festival, who also accompanies the singers. But Lizzie also performed at Noir City in Hollywood this year. She normally fronts a 10-piece outfit called the Triggermen, Lizzie and her Triggermen, but we went with a smaller combo, and she was Lizzie and the Contraband.
nice.
And she was fabulous, and that was so much fun because we did a little Roadhouse thing, because our opening night film was a nitrate print of Roadhouse, and out in the courtyard of the Egyptian Theater we had Lizzie and the Contraband playing before the show to kind of get everybody in the spirit of the thing with cocktails and all that. And then Nick and Lizzie performed a couple of songs from Roadhouse before we showed the movie. So that was really fantastic. So Laura Ellis, who is I call the Noir City Nightingale, she's been singing at our festivals for almost 10 years now, off and on. And it's interesting that Laura, while she is absolutely a professional singer, she also doubles as a crime scene data researcher for the LA Police Department. How very noir is that?
I was going to say, that's kind of perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty cool. And Lizzie just sings her heart out. So they're fabulous. So I don't have a definitive answer for you, Reg, but you got all the answers I have. So something's got to work in
Yeah,
there.
and I'm trying because I don't know if people kind of know what happens, but we send out our newsletter and our Ask Eddie announcements, and people, if you're signed up for the newsletters and the announcements, and you can just do that at filmnoirfoundation.org. You just sign up on our mailing list, and there is an address in that. When we solicit questions, we get a bunch in. Anyway, I'm really trying to pay attention to the ones that are time sensitive because I have missed a few like that'll come up and I realize we really should have answered that right away. So I will try if it's something about the festivals or something recent like a movie or something, I do try to catch those and make sure that we answer them since,
Right.
as
Yep.
well as, because we're going through a pretty big backlog.
Absolutely. And that makes perfect sense. And you do a great job of it because obviously the ones that are, as you say, the ones that are really time sensitive or current, we may bump them up, but the ones that are just kind of generic questions, we'll get around to them,
No,
but it may take a while. And that's why it's not just first come, first serve. We kind of move it around a little now to address these more pertinent ones. So anyway, okay.
okay.
Um
I'll read
it's
this
you
one.
again. It's
Yeah.
you again.
Okay. Have you heard of this film, Purple Noon? It's a French version of Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr. Ripley, which I am reading now. I saw the Matt Damon film, but now I am curious about seeing this one too. It might be a good choice for a future Noir City question mark. Heather Ripley, also talented, but in a good way.
Very funny, Heather. Okay. Yes, I have seen Purple Noon. In fact, I wish I could give you a date on this, but I'm introducing the film with Alicia Malone on Turner Classic Movies. Um, it's She has included it. Alicia has a new book that is just coming out this month, along with we both have new books coming out this month, and hers is on TCM Imports. It's just called TCM Imports, but it's very interesting. It's her selection of foreign language films and she's organized them by season, which I thought was really kind of cool because it's like winter, spring, summer, and fall movies. And she's like, when you want a movie like this, here's what I recommend. And they're kind of tied to the time of year, either because of the vibe that it evokes or because the movie might be set at that time of year. Um, and Purple Noon is definitely in that mix because, as you know, it has the ultimate sunny Mediterranean vibe to that film, sort of camouflaging the rot underneath. But it's a terrific film. I really enjoy that movie. Um, and Alain Delon is a revelation in it, and Maurice Ronet is also good. He's also in Elevator to the Gallows that was just mentioned. Um, yeah, terrific movie. So Heather, I highly recommend it, and I'd be curious to know how you think it compares to The Talented Mr. Ripley. And do you have you've seen both, right?
Yes, I have
And which do you prefer?
the TV series,
Okay, fair enough.
which is my favorite. But I kind of prefer Purple Noon in a way, just because the things they changed from the book and The Talented Mr. Ripley, um, I kind of didn't like because I felt they made Tom's character way too sympathetic, I guess, and kind of too human, which he's kind of not. He's a psychopath, and so I felt that like Alain Delon's character was kind of a little more in line with
Mm-hmm.
the character in the book. Also, he's just beautiful. I'm sorry, he's like the most
He
beautiful
is
man that ever
he is
lived.
he is the definition of a homme fatale, right? I mean,
100%.
he
Yeah.
he he is so enticing and alluring, and you can't take your eyes off of him. And he is the last man. He is the man you want, but the last man you should ever meet, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is how I always describe the femme fatale, right? It's like you just see her and it's like, oh my God, if only. And then it's like,
Yeah.
you don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
And that's definitely the way Delon plays it. I mean, can he play it any other way? I mean,
Yeah.
just by standing there, he has this vibe about him, you know. He just looks so great in that movie
Yeah.
with his little tight trousers and his loafers and no socks and his white shirts and
This tan.
yeah, just sauntering around and you know, he's amazing. Um, but highly recommended. I think it's really a good movie. I watched it again not that long ago prior to doing this introduction with Alicia and was just knocked out all over again on what a good movie it is and how fabulous the color is. And she, you know, she also included it in her book of TCM imports because it is like a if you want to, in addition to it just being a great noir story, it's a great movie to watch if you want to take a stay at home vacation in the Mediterranean. You really get the sense of the place. I think more so than the TV series because it's in color.
Hmm.
You can, and you know, sometimes I think like, what's the point of shooting the Riviera in black and white if you can shoot it in color? And I kind of feel the same way about like Raymond Chandler novels. When I read the books, they're so colorful. He goes so out of his way to paint the picture of Southern California that I feel that Chinatown is the only movie that did Chandler properly because it's in color. Like so I will always prefer it even though it's not a Chandler story.
Yeah.
I always say that's the best adaptation of Raymond Chandler just because it's in color.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's something about the quality of the light and the stucco and the cobblestones and the water and all that stuff in Purple Noon that is just so vivid in color that you know, I preferred that. Believe it or not, the noir guy preferred that to the Ripley TV series, which I completely understood why they shot it in black and white, and I applaud them for doing it because it's so uncommon these days. But I still prefer Purple Noon. Of all the versions, I still prefer Purple Noon, and I'm going to admit it's because of the color and it's because of Delon. You know, and all of them mess with the novel a little bit in one way or another, and you know, there you go. That's my opinion.
But it is gorgeous. I really want to watch it again. Now you got me hyped to sit down and watch it again because I haven't seen it in a while. I'd
Yeah.
love to see it on the big screen. I really would.
You know, I've never seen it on the big screen.
No.
So so there you go. Heather, thank you. She says, might it be a good choice for a future Noir City? Yeah, absolutely. If I did another international Noir City, I would definitely show Purple Noon. That way, because I would probably want to show a couple of Alain Delon movies. You can't go wrong, and he worked with so many great directors and made so many great crime films that hell, you could practically do an Alain Delon film festival, you know, and never duplicate um, a writer or director, right? And still show at least a dozen great crime movies that he was in.
Yeah, because I got to see Le Circle Rouge on the big screen, and I was so happy I did because I love that movie.
Yeah, again,
And
a movie in which the color is so essential to the film. You know, and then he made, you know, Rocco and his brothers, which is fabulous black and white film by Visconti that certainly has enough noir elements to qualify if I wanted to show it at a festival. But anyway,
no,
he's just fantastic. So okay. Now, Phil from Boston asks, which noir actor director would you like to be the subject of a new biography, a person who has not been done before? Phil says his choice would be Elizabeth Scott, which is kind of interesting because, wow, I wish Alan, I don't know. I know our colleague Alan Rhodey was doing a biography of Elizabeth Scott, but I just saw Alan for 10 days and I have no idea if anything has come of that. Uh, and if it's still in the works, I'm just not sure. He hasn't spoken about it in a while, so I'm suspicious that maybe that isn't happening. Um, but interesting, Phil, because Elizabeth Scott was a notoriously uh, secretive and later in her life reclusive character, and of course there were scandals in her background that really weren't they really weren't scandals, but they were considered scandalous at the time in the 1950s. And I've heard back and forth a lot of different variations on the truth of those allegations that she was a lesbian. But and I hate even using the word allegation in reference to that. It's like, who really cares? Um, she did. That's
Yeah.
the answer to that. She did. So that's why there wasn't much information about it. Anyway, as for me, uh, I don't really know. Do you have one? One doesn't pop right out at me. Like, why isn't there a biography on?
Honestly, John Alton, the cinematographer.
Yeah, that would be pretty great. I mean, Alton's. I would appreciate a new version of Alton's book, right?
Yeah.
Painting with Light, which you can only find for astronomical amounts of money now.
Yeah.
It would be great if somebody brought that back into
Because
print.
because in that book he sort of kind of mentions offhand about having a falling out at MGM. And so I'm just like, I would love to know exactly what happened with MGM because that was a pretty big kind of a, you know, impact on his career.
Well, you mean early or later his fallout at MGM? Because when he didn't tie himself to a single studio,
Yeah.
right? But he was working at MGM, and I know that I think there was some fallout. I wish my pal John Bailey was still alive because he would clarify all this for me. John was my go-to guy, a great cinematographer, and he was my go-to guy for asking questions about the lives of cinematographers because he really was a historian in that regard as well as being a cinematographer himself. And I know that there was some friction because Gene Kelly could not get on an American in Paris. Gene Kelly could not get the look he wanted in the big climactic ballet sequence, and he hired John Alton to do it instead of the guy who was shooting the rest of the movie. I think Arthur Lang, and Alton came in and bailed him out, and then the film won the Oscar for best cinematography, and John Alton did not get the share
Yeah.
in that Oscar, and I think that was where that's one falling out that he had with MGM, and as I pointed out on the last um, episode of Noir Alley, I just showed Don Siegel's movie Count the Hours, which is really not good, but Siegel's direction is pretty great for a 9-day shooting schedule. And Alton, of course, was the cinematographer, and his work is just brilliant. And I told the story of how he was not really liked by other cinematographers because his specialty, which was doing more with less, they didn't like that because anybody who came after Alton would say, I need this and I need this big lighting grid and I need all this equipment. And they would say, well, John Alton didn't need that. He just did it with practical lights. And, he always was saving the producers money and then saying, if I'm saving you $10,000, right, you can pay me $3,000 more than you were planning to, and you're still 7 grand ahead, right? I mean, that was the kind of attitude he had. And that didn't endear him to his colleagues in the business, but I think he was kind of a loner to begin with. So that's a pretty good one, a John Alton biography. I'll tell you who I would want to see, and this is a weird one, and I've even mentioned this a few times. It's not an actor and it's not a director. It's a deal maker, Charles Feldman, who was a super agent, deal maker, behind the scenes player, really prominent in the 1940s, and he had his hands in everything. And there's never been, there have been biographies of all the studio bosses, but there's never been a biography of Charles Feldman. And everybody in Hollywood knew him. He had a lot to do with a great many movies, noir and otherwise. And it's too big a book for me to tackle. I mean, I'd be interested in knowing this stuff, but I do not have the time in which to properly research it. So if anybody watching this feels up to the challenge, doing a book about Charlie Feldman, the difficult thing about it is there's so much there that it would take a long time to do proper research, and it would be for very little payoff because nobody knows who Charlie Feldman is. So while you would be doing a great service to cinema history by bringing this story to the fore and telling people who this guy was and the role he played, you're not going to sell many copies of the book because nobody knows who he is. So this is kind of a dilemma, that's why it would take like a star writer to do the book, because they might be able to sell the book based on a track record, like somebody like Sam Wasson, who did the book about the making of Chinatown and then followed it up with a book about Francis Coppola. Like if he tackled a book on Charlie Feldman, it'd probably get published. But I that's the only way I see that happening. Anyway, so there.
Okay, let's see here. Oops, sorry, lost
I
the
think
questions for a minute there. Excuse me. Oh my gosh, one
I
more
think we're at
time.
number five. I think we're at number five.
Yeah. Since I started watching film noir as a habit, I'm learning so much about life. Every film is like a lecture. Little by little, I'm developing a noir instinct, cynical pretty much about everything. You think that all these people who made those films that make you learn, producers, directors, actors, etc., would oh gosh darn it, sorry.
This is a kind of convoluted question.
Uh,
Are you lost your
yeah, let me
place on the
start. I
screen?
got it. You think that all these people who made those films that make you learn, producers, directors, actors, etc., would know so much about life and are the noblest people, but in reality, a lot of them lived quite troublesome lives. Some of them are not the best human beings, let alone the studio executives who made these films possible in the first place. They were probably very rotten people. As you said, good guys were never in charge. Why do you think that is?
Okay. This is from Tiger
Tiger.
in
Yeah.
Granada, Spain. So a question from Spain. Um, Tiger, haven't you been watching what's going on in America right now?
We did write this a year ago.
Oh, okay. Well, um, yeah, cream and bastards rise. That's the line, the Ross McDonald line from the Moving Target. But um, I mean, this is a very interesting question, but it presupposes that people who create things are doing it for altruistic reasons, or that the moralizing that came with a lot of movies of the classic era was kind of a imposed moralizing by the watchdogs of the industry. So it wasn't like the people making these movies were really trying to tell uh, stories that would set people straight about the way life is or anything. They were just trying to tell stories that appealed to them that hadn't been seen before, or in many cases, where the producers were concerned, they were trying to tell stories that had been seen before because they didn't want it. They didn't want to take any risks. It's like that made money. We'll make another one of those, and then more and more and more, which is certainly true today more than ever. And um, but here's I'll try to find some nugget here to be succinct about this. Um, Art is not made necessarily by good people. Doesn't mean they're bad people or anything. But when you're saying, the studio bosses were probably rotten people or whatever, um, it takes a lot of people to make films, right? It doesn't take a lot of people to paint a picture. It doesn't take a lot of people to make a sculpture or to take a photograph or something. Those people can be rotten, and if you don't like what you learn about them, and you can boycott their work, right? If you think Picasso was a misogynistic asshole, then don't look at his work, right? If you think that Roman Polanski is a misogynistic jerk, don't you can't as
He's
easily.
more than a misogynistic jerk. He's a fucking
He's a
criminal.
he's a pedophile or whatever. Okay, it's not as easy to just dismiss his work because he's also working with all these other people, right? I mean, it's Robert Towne wrote Chinatown, arguably the best screenplay ever written. It's taught all the time, right? John Alonzo's breakout cinematography, Faye Dunaway, in my estimation, Faye Dunaway's best performance in a movie. So, am I not going to watch all of that stuff because of Roman Polanski? The same thing you can say of every movie ever produced by
Yeah,
Harvey Weinstein.
yeah,
It's like The Grifters, right? The Grifters, which I just showed, that's a Miramax film
yeah,
that was green lighted by Harvey Weinstein. I'm not going to boycott that film because of him, because that's Angelica Houston's best performance. That's the film that was the breakout for Annette Bening. It's a fantastic script by Donald Westlake from one of Jim Thompson's best books. So I'm not going to let Harvey Weinstein spoil that for me, right? Um, that I don't know if that was exactly the question that Tiger in Granada, Spain was asking, but he says, "Why do you think this is?" Well, uh, in terms of the studios, it's because the people who rise to the top are utterly ruthless. That is why they are paid to be ruthless, and that has always been the case in American business. I'm not going to narrow this down to Hollywood. I mean, that is the case with American business. You have the people who are investing are at a remove. Stockholders are at a remove, so they don't feel the pain, right? It's
yeah,
like, make me the money and you get to be the hatchet man and we'll pay you big bucks to care about our return above all else. And that's why you get ruthless people at the top.
yeah.
And
And I think
and
too, kind of the interesting thing about that though is sometimes when you're reading stuff, you'll see a different side to somebody. Like Harry Cohen was the one that was the head of Columbia, right?
correct.
Yeah, and in her autobiography, Maureen O'Hara told a story about sitting with him in his office when his wife and son were converted to Catholicism because he was extremely upset about it.
Yeah.
And she just sat there with him because he asked her to. And that was just like, it was like I almost dropped the book because that's the only, you know what I mean? Because I've never heard
Mhm.
anything remotely like that about him before. It was really weird to get this really like different moment. And also, if people haven't read it, it's my favorite book about Hollywood, which is called A Private View, which is an amazing book. And it's a memoir. And the woman who wrote it was Mayer's daughter and Selznick's wife. And it is
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
like this completely and she also became a stage producer in her own right. But it's really fascinating to see those men told from a very personal space by someone that loved them, you know, and you get this because you're so used to seeing the other stories about them that it's very startling to kind of see this completely
Right.
different look. Which I guess all I'm saying is that people are still human.
Yeah, I completely understand. And plus, it depends on the job you're doing. Because if you look at somebody like Daryl Zanuck, right? He started as a writer and he
Yeah,
really understood movies and he was a great movie mind. You
yeah,
know, like he had a brain for movies far beyond any of the other studio heads. But then when he became the head of 20th Century Fox,
yeah,
that's going to change him.
yeah,
You know, the pressures are entirely different when you're suddenly the guy in charge. And it's very interesting because I'm sure some people listening to us now are old enough to remember when there was this odd period in recent, well, it's not recent now, but in the 80s when you know, and now I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember the studios. I think it was Fox or so. You know, when they put people in charge who were more creatives than they were hard ass business people, right? David Putnam and then Sherry Lansing when she took over uh, as the studio head. It These were not the traditional bosses, and they had a rough road. I mean, it was not easy for those people to to survive just because the business is so ruthless and and quite honestly a lot of people wanted them to fail, right? And
yeah,
this is not exclusive to the movie business. Like I've been in all kinds of corporate environments where the more human and sensitive and honestly creative you are as you assume more authority, the more everybody wants you to fail because most of the people in those businesses are none of those things, right? And so they secretly root for the demise of the talented person who's going to come in and, you know, I'll be honest with you. I watched 20 minutes of this new show, The Studio. Have you heard about this with Seth
mm-mm,
Rogen?
no,
Seth Rogen plays a producer at not a major studio, a fictitious studio that seems very much like every studio in Hollywood. And he, wants to come in and do auteur driven films, prestige films that also make money. I could only watch like 20 minutes of this before it's just turned my stomach and I couldn't watch anymore. So it's like he's making, I have to say, saying it is actually funnier than watching the show. I'm sorry,
yeah,
anybody who's watching who might have been involved in that production. I just couldn't get through it. But the first thing he does is he gets the job because he agrees to greenlight a project about Kool-Aid, right?
yeah,
Because they say, hey, look, if Barbie can make all these billions of dollars, and these are called, IP products,
yeah,
intellectual property where they're basically just selling a movie based on a product because they can make more money. And so it's like, we're going to make a Kool-Aid movie. It's perfect. And you're just thinking that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And this guy says, well, we can do it if it's a really serious, prestigious, auteur-driven movie about Kool-Aid. And then he takes a meeting with Martin Scorsese, who plays himself in this story. And Scorsese pitches him his dream project, which is a movie about Jonestown. And Seth Rogen has the bright idea of, that's my Kool-Aid movie. What do they all drink at the end? Kool-Aid. And it's like, oh my God. It's kind of a perfect gag,
yeah,
but then it goes on and it's like, this is so preposterous that
yeah.
Anyway,
And it wasn't actually Kool-Aid, but anyway.
well, but there you go. Somehow Kool-Aid survived that,
Yeah.
but so for a fact, what was it that you mean it wasn't Kool-Aid they were
No,
drinking?
it wasn't Kool-Aid. It was a different product. It was
Oh,
a
okay.
similar thing, but it wasn't Kool-Aid.
Okay. All right.
I want to say
Well,
Flavor Aid, maybe something
it
like
wasn't
that.
the Kool-Aid that killed him.
It
Let's
was
put it
not
that
actually Kool-Aid. It was actually a different product. But that's just went into the vernacular. So,
way. Yeah.
which I'm sure Kool-Aid was thrilled about. Uh,
Yeah,
but
but
just watch Sullivan's
this
Travels. If people haven't watched Sullivan's Travels, you got to watch Sullivan's Travels. It's like my
precisely.
favorite
See,
satire.
nothing really changes, I mean,
Yeah,
it's the
yeah.
same stuff today. But all this product tie-in stuff is like the death of the business to me,
Yeah, no, it is. Oh, and for people that might not know this, if you're a fan of Brother Where Art Thou, that is actually a gag. That is the name of the movie that Sullivan's trying to make in Sullivan's Travels. In case people don't
Yes.
know that, maybe you've never seen Sullivan's Travels, but you should
Yes,
see it then.
exactly.
Yeah,
Quite a savvy gag on the Coen brothers'
it
part.
was. I did. I
And
just
this is what's weird. I'm going to mention this because it's something that no one will ever see. So I thought it's worth mentioning. Last Sunday we showed Bound at the Noir City Festival, and Jennifer Tilly came out to do the discussion afterwards. She was a fucking riot. She is so incredibly funny. And the good news is the whole thing was recorded, and we'll have that to put up on the Noir City channel, right? And in the video archive, we'll have that pretty soon. But what people will not see is that we did that interview. Jennifer, when she arrived, she drove herself there. She had a reserved parking space in a gated area. There were a huge mob of people waiting for her. This is because Jennifer has kind of cornered the market on cult status,
mhm.
because she has cults of various shapes and sizes and things. She has a cult for Bound, right? Like her
Yeah,
lesbian cult. She has a cult for Bride of Chucky
yeah,
because she was Tiffany, the Bride of Chucky in like 4 different movies. She has a cult from much smaller and less public from her being a world class poker player and being seen on television and stuff playing poker. And now she has a cult from the Housewives of Beverly Hills, or I guess that's what it's called, whatever, and where she's not one of the housewives, but she's friend to the housewives. And all of these things like met like a critical mass. And so this big crowd is there, and she's so polite and kind, and she gets out and she says, yeah, I'll sign, fine, and then we go in, she watches the movie, we do this 40-minute, it wasn't a Q&A because it was just her talking for 40 minutes because she doesn't need a supporting act, believe me. And then we went out and had dinner, and then we came back to the theater like 2.5 hours after the Q&A, and she's leaving, and the crowd is still there. They're still there in the rain, and they all want her to sign product.
yeah.
They all wanted her to sign Chucky dolls and all of this stuff that they're going to turn around and resell, as long as it has her scrawl on it. And I have never seen a person handle that any more generously and politely than Jennifer did. She signed everything, standing in the rain in her stiletto heels and fishnets, signing all this stuff, and never once, feeling like, what am I doing? Blah, blah, blah. And she's very grateful about her success. And, she also has all the money in the world because she was married to Sam Simon, who was the co-creator of The Simpsons. And he took very good care of her in their divorce settlement. and then which was very amicable. And then he passed away not that long ago, and so she doesn't have to work, but she does because she really enjoys it. So anyway, that was a little detour, but I just couldn't believe that, like the merchandising that went on with all that Chucky stuff. It was
Yeah.
just incredible. Anyway, okay, moving on. I think it's me. Barbara wants to know what do we think of season 4 of True Detective? I remember you were impressed with season 1. Did you see it?
I did not. I've not seen any of it. I haven't
Okay.
even seen the
You
first
haven't seen
season.
any of
I've
any
never
no
seen
True
any of True
Detective for you.
Detective.
Okay. Um, I felt I had mixed feelings about it. It was True Detective Night Country, and it took place. My recollection is it took place in Alaska, and it was snowy. It was snowy and cold, and I felt like the setup was pretty good, but I thought the structure and the plotting and the characterizations were at times not totally coherent, and that kind of bothered me. I know there was a it was directed by, I can't remember who it was, I'm sorry, I apologize, a woman, and there was a lot of really good stuff in there about the indigenous people, and um but I really felt that Jodie Foster was the glue that held the whole show together, that without her I would not have made it to the end. I just think that I'm just going to say that I think Jodie Foster has had one of the most phenomenal careers of anybody in my lifetime. Right? It's like I've grown up with Jodie Foster from the time she was on TV sitcoms in the '60s when she was just a child, all the way up to now when she's still doing incredibly great work. I just think she's had a career unlike anybody else in my lifetime. And I just think she's absolutely fantastic. And she was great in this show. But there was stuff about the show that just rubbed me the wrong way, including the fact that at a certain point, like in the next to last or like the sixth of 8 episodes or something, a major character gets killed in the show, and it just that plot line is just dropped. Like there's no reference made to this character again, even though he's killed by another major character, and there's no resolution to it at all. You have no idea what ends up happening. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But it was evocative. It had a great premise and a really cool setting, and it was a real challenge, I think, to shoot all that stuff. But I did not like it as much as the first season, which I think I've heard they're going to bring that back. They're going to bring those two characters back. The Matthew McConaughey, sorry, Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. So I'll watch it. I'll watch it. I doubt it'll be as good as the first one, but I'll watch it.
Mhm. This is from our friend Kingpin Johnny from Doylestown, Pennsylvania. My favorite period noir is Anthony Mann's Reign of Terror, also known as The Black Book, made for Eagle Line in 1949. It's set during the French Revolution and is totally a film noir with eye-popping camera work from John Alton, some tough action, and a fair number of caustic wisecracks. The most common setting of period noir seems to be in England by gaslight, example Hanover Square, Gaslight, and So Evil My Love. What are your favorite period noirs, and are these period films truly film noirs?
Well, yes, of course they are. Uh, you know, you have to look at these films like thematically and structurally, and mostly in terms of who is the protagonist, right? And because if the villain is the protagonist, like in So Evil My Love and in like Hangover Square, uh, not the case in Gaslight. The Charles Boyer is the antagonist in that film, and Ingrid Bergman is the innocent protagonist. Uh, but in those other cases, I think they are truly noir. I would guess my favorite period noir is probably Robert Siodmak's The Suspect,
Mm-hmm.
Charles Lawton and Ella Raines. and Rosalind Ivans playing Lawton's shrewish wife, which I think is pretty close to being a perfect film uh, from the noir era. I love Reign of Terror. I actually think it's a little bit less of a film. It's film noir because John Alton shot it and it looks like a film noir. But structurally, I think it's more of a gangster movie than it
Hmm.
is film noir because it depicts the French Revolution as like a gang war,
Hmm.
between these rival factions with an undercover agent like infiltrating one of the gangs. That's the character that Robert Cummings plays. um, and it's fantastic. So as far as I would describe Reign of Terror is the most um, striking example of the noir style being applied to something outside the genre, right? It's like people who call Invasion of the Body Snatchers a film noir. It looks like a film noir, but it's clearly a science fiction movie, right? Um, but why can't the French Revolution be depicted as a gang war? I mean, it kind of was. So,
Yeah.
um, so that's my attitude about that. And I always say to people who say, "Well, that can't be a film noir," because it's set in Victorian England or something. My standard answer to that is, so what you're saying is that the clothes make it noir, because that's what the difference is, right? In The Suspect, if it was set in the 40s and it was the exact same actors delivering the exact same lines, you would have no question that it was a film noir. But because they're wearing waistcoats and vests and top hats, it's like, well, that's not film noir. And it's like, well, it is, because otherwise you're assuming that there's a dress code for film noir, which we love the fedoras and the gowns and the overcoats and all that stuff. But I don't think that's what makes the movies noir. That's just the window dressing. So that's Reign of Terror. Good film. Okay.
Yeah. And I would
Uh,
just throw in my favorite to be
oh, please. I'm
Ivy.
sorry I didn't ask.
It's okay. I said my favorite's probably Ivy because she's just so she's so incredible. It's just she's Ivy is so ruthless and while being very pretty and very like of
Joan
her
Fontaine.
time.
Joan Fontaine was great at
She
that.
was incredible in that.
She's great in that. She's great in Born to Be Bad
Yeah.
because you just can't believe she's as bad as she really is.
Yeah.
Because she just, and she has that wonderful way of acting like, oh, who, me?
Yeah.
You know, she's just so dangerous. But yeah, Ivy is a great, great pick. Now I want to switch. I want to take Ivy now because it really is fantastic. And
Yeah.
visually, it's just so compelling.
Yes.
Because that's William Cameron Menzies directing most of that. Because Sam Wood never displayed, as a director, never displayed any really strong visual style one way or the other. But that film has a look to it, and the way the frames are composed, and the claustrophobia of the rooms in that thing. Anyway, it's great choice, Anne. Okay, now Brian in Phoenix, Arizona says, how many total American film noirs were made during the classic period from 1941 to 1958? And how many of those films have since been lost, destroyed, or are unaccounted for? Well, here's why that's a tough one to answer, Brian, because we're always debating what is a film noir. So if you're debating the very um, idea of film noir, it's very hard to say how many were made, right? I can tell you that if you go on eBay, if you're a collector and you go on eBay to buy film noir posters, they are selling posters from a lot of films that are really not film noir.
Yeah.
But because it's had its renaissance and because it's become a thing, these sellers are like classic film noir, and it'll be like City of Rebuffed Men or something, 1938 from Majestic Pictures, forgotten noir classic. Here's the poster. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. But I will say that just to give, you can only give a ballpark estimate for this, right? So if you want to say studios really started making noir, a lot of noir, let's say in 1944, and if you take a 10-year stretch up to 54, I'm going to say that, right? 8 major studios, they probably made 10 of these a year. I would say that's probably the max that they would have made in a year would be 10. So then you've got what is that, right? That's 80 films from each studio times what? I'm shitty. Sorry. I'm really bad.
800.
That would be 800 films. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, there aren't 800 noir films made
Yeah.
in Hollywood during that time. And of course, most of those would have existed from 1946 to 1950. That's when they were making 10 a piece. Then after 1950, it fell off kind of dramatic. I'd say cut it in half. And then before 1944, I would say you're looking at 3 or 4 movies from each of those studios. So, if you wanted to say 400 and something that might qualify, but how many of those were really films that checked off all the boxes and weren't just crime movies or just mundane static B movies that don't really have much style in them at all? I mean, quite a few.
Yeah.
So, but here's the other thing. When he says how many have been lost, destroyed, or unaccounted for, well, if you don't know what to look for, how do you know it's lost, right? So sometimes you don't. It's a film you haven't even heard of, and it's like, is that noir or isn't it? I don't know. We have to find it in some form in order to determine that. But the reality, Brian, is it's less that they're lost than that they are inaccessible or unavailable, right? I mean, as far as lost films go, it all starts with London After Midnight, the Lon Chaney film that literally vanished, that is the holy grail of missing cinema. But stuff that we've restored, like The Prowler, it wasn't necessarily lost, it was just inaccessible, right? And the prints disappeared because nobody was in a position to maintain it, because it was an independently made film that the rights ended up with a company that did not have the resources to maintain it. And that's where the Film Noir Foundation came in, and we'll make a deal to get it back in circulation and to restore the film. Same thing with Cry Danger, with Too Late for Tears, with Trapped. These were all independently made movies that had no protections. So it was necessary for somebody like the foundation to come along, an entity like the foundation to come along and to put these things back in circulation. So that's when I say the film is lost, what I mean by that is you can't see it, right? It may still exist, but there's no way for the fans to see it. And that's where we come in. So that's the only way I can answer that question.
Okay, and this is from our friend Carlton in Atlanta, Georgia. Are there any noirs that on a subsequent viewing either improved or didn't hold up? I find that movies and books hit me differently at different stages in life.
Oh man, is that ever true? That's totally true. What what do you think about that, Anne? Is there a movie that you remember loving that you then said, "What was I thinking?" or vice versa? Like I didn't think anything.
Honestly, the first time I saw The Killers was on videotape and I was really underwhelmed with it.
The
And
original one or
then,
the Don Siegel one? The
I'm sorry,
46 or the 64 one?
46.
Ah,
Yeah, and I was like, okay. I mean, I know everybody's really into this. And then we screened it and I saw it on a big screen. I was like, God, this movie is amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
But it was really different seeing it up on the big screen. It really just hit me like in a completely different way. So for me, that's the film noirs I've seen. That's the one that really, where I was like, wow, this is just really great. And what else? And I think with books, for me, a book that I've read, in fact, I'm really overdue to reread it again, is Tender is the Night by F. Scott
mhm,
Fitzgerald, which I've read multiple times in my life, and my own life experience has like really changed how I perceived that book and understood it. So for me,
right,
that's the book that I've revisited many times that I just understood it in a really different way each time because of my life experience.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I've had that experience with, my favorite movie, In a Lonely Place.
Yeah.
I remember seeing it the first time when I was a teenager
Yeah.
and really loving it for reasons I didn't completely understand. I don't know why. I mean, and I think that's perfectly valid. It's like this movie is connecting with me in some way that I don't yet understand, but it was connecting in a very visceral way. That's like, I really love the feel of this movie. I really love what it's about, even though I didn't totally understand it the first time I saw it. And then every time it's a movie that I have grown up with, and every time I watch it, there's some new revelation that's like that I'm catching up with it, because there's so much in there about relationships and personal ones, professional ones, like the relationship between Dix and his agent,
Mhm.
Mel Whitman, gets me every time, almost to the point where I have more of an emotional reaction to their relationship and their breakup in the film than I do Bogart and
Mhm.
John Braham's breakup in the film. It just hits me in a different way. Um, but as for ones that I remember loving The Lady from Shanghai when I was younger. And I have to confess that every time I watch it, I see what could have been instead of what's actually there because I've done so much research about it. And it's hard for me to go back and experience it as its own organic thing anymore. I'm constantly seeing the story behind the making of the movie every time I watch it, which is kind of disappointing to me. I'd love to be able to go back and just have it kind of wash over me again, like it did the first couple of times I saw it. And I used to think that Orson Welles could absolutely do no wrong, like he was just the genius of geniuses. And then now I kind of probably pick on him a little more than I should because I just realize how when people it never occurred to me when he would abandon a film, right? When he would take it to a certain level and then he'd walk away from it. I naturally assumed back in the day that, oh, those monsters, the producers and the finance people, they did this to him. They're trying to crush him as an artist. And then I started to realize that he was doing a lot of it to himself.
Mhm.
Right. And it
Yeah.
was just like, well, I've got an excuse. If I walk away now, I've got an excuse for it not being as good as I thought it was going to be because I can say they took it away from me.
Yeah.
Rather than take the risk of like finishing it completely to the bitter end and saying that's the film I fought for, he would just walk away. And then I realized later in my life when I have the responsibility of working and collaborating with people, I would never do that to people. I mean, I owe it to them,
Yeah.
right? Just to see it through to the end. Like
Yeah.
we're going to the end with this, and that makes for a very different experience. Again, I'll just say this quickly. We showed this. Have you seen the movie Destroyer with Nicole Kidman?
I've never seen it and you've talked about it and I really need to see
Well, I'm going
it.
to talk about it a lot more right now
Yeah.
because we showed it last Saturday And Karin Kusama, the director, and Phil Hay, one of the writers of the film, came and talked about it. And it was so, it was a very emotional experience for everybody because the film played great. I mean, it was a packed theater, and the film just played like gangbusters. And huge ovation at the end. And it was obvious that Karin and Phil, that this film was a massive disappointment to them. The fact that it was obvious they put everything they knew into this film. The screenplay is fabulous. Karin's direction is unbelievably good. And it was a masterpiece. That film, I think, is a masterpiece. And nobody has seen it. Like 80% of the audience who was there had not seen it and didn't really know what it was, what they were getting into. And man, was that clearly painful for them. And Karin has not directed another feature film since then. It was released in December of 2018. She's done a lot of TV work and everything, but it's, you know, I think most directors would tell you it's not the same.
Yeah.
Working on television is not, it's lucrative, but it's not quite the same as getting that feature film out there in theaters. And I'm sure Nicole Kidman was extremely disappointed as well because she put everything she had into that movie. And anyway, I just was thinking of that when I thought about Wells, like walking away from so many films. I thought, imagine if a film like Destroyer or something, which clearly was a low budget film. It's only $10 million to make that movie, and it stars Nicole Kidman, right? I mean, most of her movies have budgets 6 or 7 times that. And if Karin had said like, "Well, I'm not getting my way. This isn't going right," or whatever, and she had walked away, I can't even conceive of it. You know. So there. That.
There.
I'm. You can tell I'm writing an essay about Destroyer right now. That's what I was doing before I
Oh,
got
okay.
on here. So that's why it's so fresh in my mind, and I brought that up. But anyway,
Anyway.
is it me now?
Yes, you. Number 10.
Um, Britt from Lynchburg, Virginia. Britt had a question on the last one we did.
Yes.
How have either of you taken to being in leadership positions at the Film Noir Foundation and elsewhere? I feel like many noir heads must have a complicated relationship to authority. I know I do. Has leadership come naturally or has it taken some adjusting? Well, that's an interesting question. Um, I I don't even know where to start answering this one. Um, I will admit that I have lived a life where I am a natural contrarian. I do not deal well with authority. That is goes without saying, which I think has served me in good stead since I've decided to create a foundation and stuff because I have no leadership capabilities at all other than just treat people the way you want to be treated. That's the only thing I believe in. If you want to say you're assuming leadership, uh what was the expression he used? Leadership position or
Yeah.
something. And do you feel you have a leadership position, or I mean you have responsibilities for
I mean, I
sure?
have responsibilities. I mean, it's not really. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a leadership. I mean, I've had leadership positions. I mean, I managed video stores for like forever. That's what I did before I moved up here. So I mean, yeah, not really. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm not really leading anyone else. I mean, I just try and I mean, I have to deal sometimes with negative comments and stuff on the social media and like deal with those kind of things that come up. And there is part of me sometimes I just feel like saying, Jesus, fuck you. But I can't comment that back,
You can't do that. You're not
I
supposed to do
can't
that.
do that. Even sometimes people, and so it's like, okay, well, is this person like, do we ignore it? Do we respond to it politely or whatever? And that's more of a customer service thing, which I've done for
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
for a
yeah.
really long
Exactly.
time,
Exactly.
So, you know.
But it's interesting because I never think of myself in these terms. But a leader to me is in the way Britt is referring to it, is someone who has the responsibility of getting people to do what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what a
Yeah.
leader is, right? You're able to inspire, and I think some leaders lead by inspiring people. Other people lead through fear and intimidation and all that kind of bullshit, which I don't think ever works in the long run, which is why it never even occurs to me to do that. I'm not capable of it, for starters, but I don't see the value of it. I don't see how good, how sustainable good comes from that kind of behavior. So yeah, I just think that where the Film Noir Foundation is concerned, my quote unquote leadership has been to try to find those inspiring connections that draw people to the foundation, to accomplish this mission of keeping the films alive, um, and collaborating with people who want the same thing, right? So it's like creating some light and some heat so that it draws people, and then you're able to do this stuff. I'll say this because I'm intrigued by this question, Britt, and I will say this about this is a lesson I learned years ago, and I think it was really, really important. If you're in a position of leadership, that means that you have a certain amount of power, and this is very applicable to the situation in the world today, right? To me, power is like an electrical current. It gets things done, it motivates things, it moves things. There's an electric current that exists that you tap into, and it energizes stuff. If you attempt to hold on to that power, it will kill you. It will destroy you eventually, because power, like electricity, it has to flow through a circuit. If it stops at one point, then it builds up and it explodes and everything goes to hell. That's why I have always felt that the job of someone with power and in a position of leadership or something is to keep that electrical energy flowing, keep it circulating, move it on, pass it on to somebody else, delegate it, get as many people involved as possible, and don't have it terminate in one place. Because I'm sure that everybody has worked in an environment where the power they have where the power stops at one person and you hate that person.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they think they're it, and they are not inspiring anybody, or uh you know empowering to use a perfect word, empowering people to take responsibility for their own actions. They're just like lording it over them and wielding their power. I guarantee you that they will self-destruct. That's what's going to happen. I'm waiting for it to happen right now. So anyway, thanks for that question, Britt. That we went into an area there that I did not expect to go into on this edition of Ask Eddie and Ann. Okay.
Oh, this is me.
You.
This is from Jan from Stockholm, Sweden.
Stockholm, Sweden. So we have a Sweden and a Spain in this show. That's very cool.
An international noir show. Uh, this time I have some questions about Leonard Krieger, Vincent Price, and John Brahm. To start with, Eddie in an intro or an outro to guys. Sorry.
Oh, you got three. You got three back there.
I got three back there. Two of them started fighting. The siblings started fighting. He can
They're
beat
okay.
me.
They're cool. They're
They're
cool.
cool. This time I have some questions about Leonard Krieger, Vincent Price, and John Brahm. To start with, Eddie in an intro or outro to Hangover Square or Noir Alley mentioned that Leonard Krieger died before he could play the part that went to Vincent Price in Dragonwyck. Is the same thing true for the part of the protagonist that Price got in Shock?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I just think it was. I think that Krieger was up for Dragonwyck. He was scheduled to play the role in Dragonwyck, but beyond that, I don't think there was any. After that, it was just Vincent Price.
Next, I want to ask you about The Mad Magician, a film from 1954 directed by John Brahm with Vincent Price in the lead role. It's a really good movie, by the way. In this film, there is a scene that is exactly the same as in another film that Brahm directed, Hangover Square, except now with Price instead of Krieger. It is the bonfire scene, which is really a great scene. Do you know any other film where a director this way borrowed, copied, sampled a scene from another film that he or she has directed?
Yes, I do. But tell me, I haven't seen The Mad Magician, so tell me about that. I know you're a huge Vincent Price fan,
Oh
so
God, it's been so long since I've seen this one, so I'm hoping I'm not getting it mixed up with another one.
but you recall it as being a really good
It
film.
was really good. Yeah, it
Can you
was
hear
just
that?
yeah.
Yeah, my ride's here. I gotta go. That was close. Okay.
My ex sister was so drunk one time, she got in the back of a cop car and gave him her address because she thought it was a taxi.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I will never forget. I worked for a guy one time. He shall remain nameless, but we were out drinking and we left the bar and he hailed the taxi and the taxi pulls up and he says to the guy, "Hey, guys, take me home." And the guy goes, "Where is home?" And he goes, "Where I live." Oh, that's what drinking can do to you sometimes.
It's just true.
Okay. Anyway, so The Mad Magician.
Yeah.
I have
So
not
yeah,
seen it. I'll look
yeah,
for it.
yeah. So it's kind of now that I think about now that I'm thinking about Hangover Square in terms of it, there is kind of a similarity to kind of the storyline too. Because he's sort of unraveling. He's an artist and he's sort of unraveling mentally.
Unraveling artist. It's a
Unraveling artist, yeah.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
an uncommon character. Um, I can tell you that, like for instance, the most obvious example of this, two immediately come to mind. Um, and it's not just borrowing; it's like redoing it. Was Maxwell Shane did a film in 1946, I think, called Fear in the Night, based
Yeah.
on a Cornell Woolrich story. And then 10 years later,
Yeah.
he made the same movie called Nightmare. Same guy made the same movie again. The second time it was with Edward G. Robinson and Kevin McCarthy.
But that's kind of perfect for Woolrich because Woolrich did that.
Yeah, of course. He was
Yeah.
cannibalizing his short stories and changing like an element or two, but keeping the basic premise, the race against the clock. I've only got 6 hours to find this needle in a haystack kind of thing.
In fact, the
Or
radio show, sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say the radio show Suspense, they took one of Woolrich's story, the one about, there's like this series of, it's about arson. It's about a series of fires. They're set by an arsonist. And it's so funny because they did it 3 different times on that show and it had 3 different endings.
Yeah, see, it's and I know exactly, I can't remember the title of it, but I know exactly the story you're talking about because
Yeah.
I have that paperback edition of Woolrich stories where that's in there because it has a flaming thing going on the cover of the story. And this is interesting. This is a beautiful question, Jan, because it brings us full circle for the show because we started out talking about Purple Noon and the another film that I'm showing with Alicia on TCM on her TCM Imports show is The Vanishing,
Yeah.
which is a film that she also wrote about in her new book. And if people have not seen The Vanishing, George Slizer's Belgian film, I forget what year it's from, 1990 something
Yeah.
or 80 something, I can't remember. Um, it's one of the most upsetting movies ever made. Just in terms of the ending of the film is so devastating. You've seen it, right?
I have not actually seen it.
Oh, okay. And this movie is incredible. And and then this is the weirdest thing ever. Hollywood hired George Slizer to do the film in an English language version,
Yeah.
and he did it, and it's terrible.
Yeah, that
Terrible.
I've seen actually, believe it or not.
Yeah, with Kiefer Sutherland and Jeff Bridges,
Yeah.
uh, and and it's not good. And in some respects, I think that Slizer made the film, took the money because it was Hollywood money, and I swear he took the money and made it intentionally to show how inferior the Hollywood version was to his original version. I'm not saying he sabotaged it. I'm just saying he went along with all of the changes that they said had to be made, knowing, I think, full well that it was going to be a complete dud
Yeah.
compared to his original film. But it was like, now I'm getting paid for the original film. Now I'm getting really paid for
Yeah.
the original film, but he knows it's going to stink and pale in comparison to that one. And he just took the money and ran.
Yeah.
And so if you ever, anybody who's watching this who hasn't seen either of these
No,
movies,
no, no, no. Sorry.
uh, do not watch the Hollywood version.
Ow,
No,
don't
no
hurt me.
offense to Jeff Bridges and Kiefer Sutherland, but do not watch the Hollywood version. Watch the original Belgian version, and you will have one of the most compelling and upsetting experiences with a movie that you could possibly have.
Yeah.
It is one of the two most disturbing films I've ever seen. The Vanishing and Don't Look Now. Nick Rogue's Don't Look Now
That movie.
are the two most unsettling films because they all are just building up. Your entire experience watching the movie is just a build up to the ending, and then the ending is just, oh shit, like what did I just watch? Oh my god, I can't believe that's the end.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when a movie can pull that off, you know which I'm going to give another little shout out to Destroyer because that has an ending that is very much like that, where it's like you just do not see it going exactly where it's going, and then all of a sudden it's there and it ends, and you're like, holy cow, that was surprising.
Yeah.
So anyway, good questions this time.
Okay,
Really,
one
I mean,
more.
they're always good. Is there one more?
According to IMDb, the Mad Magician
Oh,
also borrowed something from another of Brahms' films with Krieger the Lodger. Do you know what was taken from that
oh,
film? I would have to watch both films again
yeah. I haven't seen
to
The
answer
Lodger
that
in
one.
quite a while. I mean, I know it's like a Jack the Ripper film. It's clearly based
Yeah.
on Jack the Ripper. Uh, but I not having seen The Mad Magician, I could not tell you what that was.
Yeah.
So I will now, thank you, Jan. I will now add The Mad Magician to my list of films that I have to watch. And and we'll see if anything registers. Good questions.
Thank you, everybody.
They're usually good, but at least there was no noir or not question. Uh,
Well,
maybe
technically there was.
I
Are
guess
period films
technically
noir
there
or
was,
not? You know.
but that was good. So, I encourage people to take a page from Britt's book here. That question about leadership position. I mean, it seemed when I read that question, it was like, this is odd. I don't know, but it really got me thinking. And so I hope what I said made some sense, but it's good. I don't mind these screwball left field questions are really good. So that's, you know what I'm saying, not screwball
But
questions, but
left field.
yeah, they come kind of out of left field. That's good. It gets the brain working. So, Anne, I think we already have another one of these scheduled. I think
Yeah.
we
We'll
can fit one in next week.
get another one going. Yeah, because we're on a roll because we're kind of in between things. So people know we're sort of, because Hollywood was broken up by 2 weekends, and then we don't have anything till TCM in April. I'm trying to take advantage of us. So I'm stockpiling these.
Fabulous. That's great. And I just
So we can have
yesterday, and I'll see you, right? I'll see you at the TCM
yeah,
festival.
yeah. You
Fabulous,
will. You
fabulous.
will.
I hope we have a chance to spend a little time together. You know, they run me ragged at that thing, and I'm very excited that I got my number one choice that I wanted to present at the
All right.
festival, which is Blue Velvet. I'll be presenting Blue Velvet with Kyle MacLachlan.
I was hoping that you would get that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so yeah, I basically said I do this or I quit, and no, not seriously, but I really wanted to pay tribute to David Lynch at the festival, and to do it with Kyle MacLachlan, it will be very, very special. So yeah, and there is not a lot of noir at this year's festival, since it's like I forget what they're calling the theme. I hate to say that, but it's like
Yeah.
grand illusions, I think
Yeah.
it. So it's a lot of fantasy and science fiction and stuff like that. So like I'm introducing Superman
Yeah.
and a few other things. I'm introducing Apocalypse Now, which will be interesting because that same day, I think the American Film Institute is having a tribute to Coppola.
Yeah.
That same day that I will be introducing Apocalypse Now at the festival. So um, that'll be pretty cool. So anyway, that's it. Now I'm gonna go make dinner.
Okay. Sounds good. I'm going to go to bed.
Keep those cats under control.
I will do my best. I think my girl is finally feeling better. My old lady is, I think, doing a lot better. So yay.
Well, you may see Tizzy at the TCM festival. She's going to
All
come
right.
down with me, so
Very cool.
she'll enjoy that. She'll enjoy seeing you. Ann.
Are you bringing your wife too, or just the cat?
No, Kathleen is coming as well, and we're probably going to drive down.
No.
Probably going to drive down with Tizzy in the car, and then and that way Kath has the car so she can escape the festival, and she'll do a few things with me at the fest, but mostly she'll be working. She has an office in downtown LA, and she'll probably be there doing some work with Tiz. But who knows? Maybe I'll drag Tizzy out to make an unexpected appearance at the festival.
Be
She
very
can.
cool.
I'll see if there's a good film that she can introduce with me at the festival. That'd be kind of cute.
That would
Okay.
be.
All
Okay.
right. Now, cocktail and dinner is calling, and I appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate the questions, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.